Let's continue our story about vanished FBI agent in 1990. So, the line went dead. Croft's opulent study plunged into a silence thicker than the mountain fog outside. The echo of Briggs' enraged roar, "Open this goddamn door," still vibrated in the air, transmitted through Miller's terrified voice. The Denver field office emergency line rang once, twice in my ear. Croft stared at me, his face a mask of crumbling arrogance. The blood drained away, leaving only the pallor of impending ruin. The tumbler of expensive liquor sat forgotten on the mantel, a monument to a life built on lies that were finally collapsing. Denver FO, Agent Vance speaking. Emergency backup required Cedar Falls PD immediately. I barked into the phone, my eyes locked on Croft. Sheriff Robert Briggs is attempting to forcibly breach the evidence locker to destroy critical federal evidence related to an active homicide investigation. He is armed, hostile, and potentially compromised. Deputy Miller is barricaded inside with the evidence. Request SWAT and immediate tactical support. Code 3. Croft flinched at SWAT. The reality of federal intervention, of his carefully constructed world shattering under the weight of a single blood-stained boot, hit him like a physical blow. Understood, Agent Vance. The dispatcher responded, voice crisp and urgent. Units en route. ETA 15 minutes. Hold the line for tactical coordination. 15 minutes. An eternity with Briggs unhinged on the other side of town. I relayed the layout of the Cedar Falls PD, the location of the evidence locker, Miller's position. All the while, Croft stood frozen, the veneer of the powerful landowner replaced by a cornered, terrified man. Present day, Cedar Falls PD evidence locker. Inside the cramped, windowless evidence room, Miller pressed his back against the heavy metal door, his service weapon drawn but trembling. The air was thick with the smell of dust, stale paper, and his own fear. Outside, the pounding was relentless, a physical assault on the door and his nerves. Thud, thud, thud. Miller, last chance. Open this door, or I swear to God. Briggs' voice was raw, stripped of authority, pure animal desperation. The door shuddered under another heavy impact. A battering ram? A boot? Miller could hear Dawes' voice, high-pitched and pleading, trying to calm Briggs. Ignored. State techs are here, Sheriff. They can witness. Shut up, Dawes. This is county business. Vance is tampering with evidence. Miller, open up. Miller fumbled for his phone, hitting redial. Agent. He's trying to break it down. Dawes can't stop him. State techs are here, but they're just watching. Hold the line, Miller. My voice came through, strained but steady. Backup is minutes out. The safe is secure. You are secure. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Let them witness Briggs' actions. Record everything if you can. Present day, Croft Estate. I turned the full force of my attention back to Croft, the phone still held to my ear, the dispatcher coordinating in the background. Your sheriff is committing career suicide and federal felonies right now, Croft. To protect you. To protect the secret of what your grandfather stole and what you killed to keep. How much is that land worth now? How much is Briggs' loyalty worth when he's facing life in prison? I took a step closer. You heard Briggs on the phone. He's panicking. He's cornered. And cornered men talk. He'll give you up to save his own skin. He's already started. Croft's eyes darted wildly. The weight of Briggs' potential betrayal, the imminent arrival of federal SWAT, the damning boot locked away, it was too much. His carefully maintained control snapped. It was just land, he exploded, his voice cracking. Dusty, worthless creek land. Until the assay, grandfather found traces, promise. He needed the full parcel. The Finches wouldn't sell. So he persuaded the old man to sign it over. Walter's grandfather, witnessed by that drunkard's ancestor. Walter found the old papers, the threats. He blackmailed me. Eleanor Shaw found copies in my donated records. That meddling librarian. He paced, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, disheveling it. The first death, a drifter poking around the creek bend where the vein was richest. It was an accident, a fight over trespassing. But then the idea came. The stones, old Gable's superstitious nonsense. We used it, made it look like something other. Finch helped. He was greedy and scared stupid of Gable's stories. It kept people away, protected the real value. He stopped, breathing heavily, staring at me with haunted eyes. Stewart. He wouldn't let it go. He found Shaw's notes, connected the stones to the land, to Finch. He went to Henderson's that morning to pressure Finch. Finch called me, panicking. Stewart had confronted him. Finch pulled a knife. Stewart disarmed him, cut him bad. Arterial. Briggs was already on his way. I called him when Finch phoned. Told him to handle it. Permanently. Croft's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't mean, not like that. Briggs, he just shot him. Cold. Then they made Henderson help hide the bodies. Finch in the creek. Stewart under the floor. He sank into a leather armchair, looking ancient and broken. The stones, the whispers, it was just noise. To cover the gold. To cover the blood. Present day, Cedar Falls PD, simultaneously. Outside the evidence locker door, the battering stopped abruptly. A different kind of noise filtered through, shouting, but not Briggs. Demanding, authoritative. Sheriff Briggs. FBI. Drop your weapon. Step away from the door. Now. Denver SWAT. Early. Miller nearly sobbed with relief, slumping against the door. Through the thick metal, he heard Briggs' enraged bellow, a scuffle, Dawes yelling, "Don't," and then the unmistakable, terrifying sound of a gunshot. Silence. Deadly silence. Then, the SWAT team leader's voice, amplified. Sheriff Briggs is down. Repeat, Briggs is down. Medic. Secure the area. Miller didn't move. He just listened to the sudden flurry of activity, the radio chatter, the urgent calls for a medic. The boot in the safe behind him suddenly felt heavier than lead. Present day, Croft Estate. My phone buzzed, not the FO line, but Miller. I put Croft on speaker. Miller? Status. SWAT. SWAT is here, Agent. Miller's voice was shaky but clear. Briggs. He drew down on them when they ordered him to surrender. They fired. He's down. Medic's working on him. A beat. The evidence is secure. Croft made a strangled sound, burying his face in his hands. The last pillar of his corrupt world had just crumbled in a hail of gunfire. The state lab tech's voice suddenly cut in on Miller's end, loud enough for the phone to pick up. Deputy. Preliminary on the creek blood. It's AB negative. Confirmed. The final piece. Finch's blood, spilled again, 35 years later, on the land stolen by Croft's grandfather. Spilled during a struggle to cover the blood spilled in Henderson's basement. The circle was horrifically closed. I looked at Arthur Croft, hunched and broken in his expensive chair, surrounded by trophies bought with blood and lies. It's over, Croft. The gold, the land, the lies, the murders, it's finished. I nodded to his security guard, who looked stunned, and the Denver FO agents who had silently entered the room during the call. Arthur Croft, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, federal land fraud, and accessory after the fact to the murders of Michael Stewart and Walter Finch. You have the right to remain silent. As I recited the Miranda rights, the words felt like an epitaph for Cedar Falls' decades of darkness. The whispers hadn't been ghosts or ancient hungers. They had been the terrified conscience of a town choking on secrets, finally screaming to be heard. The sound of Briggs' final, fatal shot echoed the gunshot that killed Mike Stewart in a dank basement. But this time, it wasn't an ending in shadow. It was the brutal, necessary sound of silence finally being shattered. The badge found in the dark had led to the light, and the truth, however bloody, was finally out. The fluorescent lights of the Denver field office interrogation room hummed with a sterile, unforgiving buzz. Across the scarred metal table, Robert Briggs looked diminished. The bluster, the authority, the granite-faced sheriff persona had crumbled into a hunched, gray shell of a man. His hands, cuffed in front of him, trembled slightly on the tabletop. The weight of 35 years, compressed into a few hours of relentless interrogation, had finally broken him. I sat across from him, not with triumph, but with a cold, hollow ache. Mike's face, the sharp intelligence, the dry humor captured in old photos, seemed superimposed over Briggs' broken form. The betrayal was a physical thing, a stone lodged in my chest. "Start from the beginning, Sheriff," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the rage that had fueled me for weeks. November 4th, 1990. Henderson's basement. Briggs didn't look up. His voice, when it came, was a ragged scrape, devoid of its former gravel. "Stewart, he was good. Too damn good." He swallowed hard. Finch called Croft, panicking. Said Stewart had cornered him at Henderson's shack. Finch pulled a knife, idiot. Stewart disarmed him fast. Got the knife, stabbed Finch in the thigh high up. Hit the artery. AB neg blood, it went everywhere. Like a fountain. He closed his eyes, flinching at the memory. Finch was screaming, thrashing. Henderson, useless old drunk, he just stood there babbling about the creek, about curses. Stewart, he was trying to stem the bleeding, yelling for Henderson to get towels, call an ambulance, radioing his partner. Briggs paused, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Then Croft called me. "Briggs," he said, voice like ice. "Handle it. Permanently. Stewart knows too much. Finch is a loose end." He opened his eyes, finally meeting mine. There was no remorse, only a desperate, haunted exhaustion. I got there, maybe 10 minutes later. Basement was chaos. Blood all over the dirt floor. Finch was already gray, gasping. "Stewart." He looked up when I came down the stairs. Relief. God, the relief in his eyes. "Briggs," he says, "thank God. He's bad. We need." Briggs' voice hitched. He looked down at his cuffed hands. I drew my service weapon. Didn't even think. Just pointed. Pulled the trigger. Twice. Center mass. The words hung in the air, stark and brutal. He just folded. Didn't make a sound. Just gone. The silence that followed was deafening. The sterile hum of the lights seemed to amplify the horror. Mike, trusting the local sheriff, seeing help arrive, only to be executed. The emotional impact was a physical blow. I forced myself to breathe, to stay focused. "And Finch?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Finch bled out while we watched," Briggs said dully. "Took a few more minutes. Henderson. Croft paid him off. A lifetime stipend, quiet money. We waited until full dark. Put Finch in Croft's old pickup. Weighted him with rocks from the creek bend, the smooth ones. Figured it was fitting somehow. Dumped him deep in Whisper Creek where the current runs fast." He gestured vaguely. "Stewart." Henderson knew about the old root cellar beneath the basement dirt floor. Sealed off years before. We dragged him down there. Henderson helped me seal it back up with quick-set cement he had for some damn fool project. Buried his gear, his gun, his cuffs, his spare mags, deep in the woods. His badge. Briggs shuddered. Covered in Finch's blood. Henderson shoved it behind that shelf, covered it with burlap sacks. said the earth would swallow the truth. He gave a bitter, hollow laugh. Almost did. He confessed to the cover-up, planting the walked-away story, intimidating potential witnesses, destroying the partial boot print evidence from the basement, ensuring Croft's fraudulent land deeds vanished. He confirmed Croft orchestrated the use of the stones after the first accidental killing to create the Whisper Creek curse myth, using Gable's folklore and Finch's superstitious fear to keep people away from the gold-rich land. Eleanor Shaw died because she uncovered both the land fraud and recognized the stone's specific origin. Mike Stewart died because he pieced it all together. Present day, Cedar Falls, Henderson's property, 3 days later. The heavy machinery stood silent, a respectful distance away. The air was cold and crisp, smelling of damp earth and pine, undercut now by the sterile scent of forensic chemicals. A large section of Henderson's collapsed basement floor had been carefully excavated, revealing a crude, brick-lined chamber beneath, the root cellar. Miller stood beside me, his face pale but set. Forensic anthropologists worked meticulously in the pit. The atmosphere was hushed, reverent despite the grim task. "They found him, Agent Vance," Miller said quietly, his voice thick. Just like Briggs said. They'd recovered the remains. Preliminary identification, based on dental records and the remnants of a distinctive belt buckle Mike was known to wear, confirmed it. Michael James Stewart. Found. After 35 years in the cold, dark earth beneath a liar's floor. The weight of that reality settled over the scene, heavier than the mountain fog rolling down the slopes. The ghost had a name, and now a body. Present day, Arthur Croft's holding cell, later. Croft looked smaller without the trappings of his wealth and estate. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on him. He sat rigidly on the bunk, refusing to meet my eyes through the plexiglass. The arrogance was still there, but it was brittle, cracking under the weight of Briggs' detailed confession and the irrefutable evidence. The boot, the blood, the body. Briggs saying, "Croft," I said flatly, like a canary facing life without parole. He detailed everything. Your orders. Your payments, your grandfather's fraud, your exploitation of Gable's folklore to cover murder, your gold. Croft's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The silence was his last, pathetic defense. Michael Stewart trusted the system. I continued, the cold rage bubbling beneath the surface of my professional calm. He trusted the badge Briggs wore, and you used that trust to have him murdered. You buried him like trash. For land. For gold. I leaned closer. Your balance was built on greed and blood. And it's over. He finally looked up, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and terror. Not remorse. Never remorse. My lawyers. We'll be busy. I cut him off. Facing federal conspiracy, accessory to murder, obstruction of justice, and fraud charges. Briggs gave you up to save his own skin. He gave us everything. I stood. Enjoy the silence, Croft. It's the only thing you own now. Present day, Whisper Creek, evening. I stood alone on the bank near the bend. The water murmured its endless song, but the whispers felt different now. Just water. Just stones. The eerie weight Gable had spoken of was gone, lifted by the crushing, ugly weight of human truth. In my hand, I held the smooth river stone I'd found, the one etched with the crude symbol, a circle and a jagged line. Not a map to treasure or a mystical boundary, just a marker of human greed, fear, and the monstrous lies spun to conceal it. Miller had stayed at the site, coordinating the final stages of evidence collection. The fever that had burned in my skull since finding Mike's badge, the gnawing obsession, the relentless drive, was finally cooling, leaving behind a profound, weary sadness and the cold satisfaction of justice served, however delayed. Decision and resolution. My hand closed around the cold stone. Mike's voice echoed, not from a flashback, but from a clear memory of his mentorship. Truth doesn't care if it's pretty, kid. It just needs to be heard, even if it screams. It had screamed. Through Briggs' confession, through the forensic evidence, through the grim discovery beneath Henderson's floor. It screamed of corruption, murder, and the ultimate betrayal of trust. My path was clear. See this through to the bitter end. Ensure Briggs and Croft face the full, unrelenting force of federal justice. Be the voice for Mike, for Eleanor Shaw, for the other victims whose deaths were twisted into a monstrous myth. Ensure Cedar Falls couldn't rebuild its facade without acknowledging the rotten foundation. I drew my arm back and threw the etched stone, hard, into the deepest, fastest current of Whisper Creek. It landed with a decisive plunk, vanishing instantly beneath the swirling, dark water. Let the creek carry the symbol of the lie away. Let the water cleanse nothing, but simply move on. The snow began to fall again, soft flakes catching the fading light. It felt like a shroud, not of secrecy, but of acknowledgement. The truth was out. Michael Stewart was coming home. The whispers of the creek were just water over stones. The silence that followed wasn't eerie. It was the exhausted quiet after a long, brutal storm. The case wasn't closed yet, but the ghosts were finally laid to rest. The weight of the truth was immense, but for the first time in 35 years, it was a weight born in the light. Here is the final part, where the whispers end. The Colorado mountains wore their deepest winter white, the silence over Cedar Falls profound and heavy, like the snowdrifts muffling the world. It wasn't the eerie, watchful silence of before. It was the quiet after the avalanche, the stillness of exhaustion, of truth finally settling onto ground too long poisoned by lies. Arlington National Cemetery. The wind off the Potomac cut like a knife, scouring the solemn rows of white markers. The folded flag rested in the elderly, trembling hands of Mike's sister, Helen. Her tears traced paths through the fine snow dusting her coat. Her sons stood tall beside her, their faces etched with a grief now laced with hard-won peace. The stark inscription on the new headstone said it all. Michael James Stewart, FBI agent, 1950 to 1990. He brought the light. He hadn't vanished. He hadn't walked away. He'd been murdered in the dark for doing his job, for chasing the light of truth into a town's deepest shadows. Now, he rested among heroes, his sacrifice recognized, his name cleared. The betrayal by Briggs, the man who wore the same symbol of trust Mike did, would forever stain Cedar Falls history, but it couldn't touch Mike's legacy here. I placed a single, smooth river stone, unmarked, unchained to any symbol or lie, collected from a clear stream miles from Whisper Creek at the base of the granite. It was cold in my hand, then colder on the frozen earth. Not an offering to any spirit, just a weight, a marker of a journey ended, a promise kept. You found it, Mike, I whispered, the wind stealing the words. The truth, however ugly it was. The familiar ache in my chest was still there, a scar over the old wound of his loss. But the fever, the gnawing obsession that had driven me since finding his tarnished badge, was gone, replaced by a weary, deep-rooted calm. Justice wasn't always sweet, but it was necessary. The ledger, stained with 35 years of deceit, was finally balanced. Cedar Falls, a final glimpse. I didn't stay long. The town needed to heal its own way, without the constant reminder of the federal agent who'd torn its scab off. Henderson's property was a blank slate now, a patch of disturbed earth covered by fresh snow, the root cellar forever sealed beneath. Near the Whisper Creek Bend, a simple stone plaque, funded by a humbled town council, stood amidst the pines. In memory, Eleanor Shaw, and the victims of greed and deceit. May truth bring peace. No mention of curses, no cryptic symbols, just names, just acknowledgement. Agnes Gable passed me on Main Street, clutching library books. She met my gaze, gave a small, solemn nod, and walked on, her head held higher than before. She was donating her uncensored historical records, finally setting the town's real story free from the cage of Croft's monstrous lies. Miller, now wearing a sheriff's deputy badge with a gravity it hadn't held before, stood talking to a group of townsfolk near the diner. He saw me, nodded once, a nod of understanding, of shared burden, and of quiet resolve to rebuild trust on a foundation of honesty, however painful. The brittle prettiness was gone. Cedar Falls looked weathered, stripped bare, but somehow stronger. Real. The Whispering Creek flowed, its sound just water on stone now. The ghosts were quiet. The road home, driving out of the valley, the snow fell thicker, blurring the mountains into soft gray shapes. The closed case file sat on the passenger seat, a physical weight lifted. Mike Stewart rested. Croft awaited trial in a federal prison, his empire of gold-dusted lies reduced to orange jumpsuits and legal motions. Briggs was dead by his own cowardice, escaping earthly judgment but forever condemned by his confession. The boot, the badge, the blood, they were evidence tags now, part of a record that screamed the truth into the silence. The radio played softly, some old song Mike might have hummed along to. I thought of his dry voice, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Truth doesn't care if it's pretty, kid. It just needs to be heard, even if it screams. It had screamed. Through the crusted blood on a hidden badge, through the unique tread of a boot caught in panic, through the crumbling lies of a corrupt sheriff and a greedy landowner, through the cold earth finally giving up its long-held secret. It had screamed across 35 years, and finally, Cedar Falls had stopped whispering long enough to listen. The snow swirled in the headlights. The road ahead was open, leading back to D.C., back to other cases, other shadows. But I carried the weight differently now. The gnawing void Mike's disappearance left wasn't gone, but it was filled with resolution, not obsession. The whispers of Whisper Creek were just the wind and the water. I shifted gears, the tires crunching on the snow-packed road. The mountains watched in their ancient silence as I drove east, leaving the valley and its hard-won quiet behind. The case was closed. The light Mike sought had finally been brought. And in its clear, cold glare, the only echo left was the fading hum of the engine, carrying me away from the place where the whispers finally ended. What you think about this story? Write in the comment your opinion. On my channel, you can watch other revenge or cheating stories. See you soon, my dear viewer.